Hey y'all, here's a countertop I've been working on. It's going to be a deep pour epoxy counter. It's a white oak slab I cut on my sawmill. It's about 24 inches wide and 2 inches thick. It's got a live edge on this side here. It's got some blemishes, but close to half of it's still live edge. It's got this natural crack run down the center. So I'm going to pour that deep with epoxy. I'm going to inlay old rusty barbed wire in the crack. So I'll cut me off sections of this and have the barbed wire in there. This here is the backsplash for it. It's live edge white oak as well from the same tree. It's about 10 foot long. Here's the sink we'll put in it. I've got it sitting in here just to make sure I did the cuts right. I didn't round my edges when I cut. I just cut out a big square for the sink. Wasn't even thinking about it. So these here, I had to cut 4 corners to stick in there so it would look right. Hopefully the epoxy will fill those up and make them look more natural. All right, well I gotta get cutting this barbed wire. Stay tuned. Okay, so I got the first coating on. I got the barbed wire put in place. So far I really like what I'm seeing. My son was joking around and suggested we put some coffee beans in. So we put a few coffee beans in hidden in the pour, as well as some other, like maybe some these old U-nails from fencing. So now, there's some coffee beans there. Now I'm going to go ahead, it's late, I'm going to go ahead and just pour this full here and leave it overnight, because I don't want to mess with doing the whole countertop and worrying about bubbles. So I'll do this now, fill that up, and then you know, if something gets on it, I can always sand that down or just do the third pour on top of it to cover up any blemishes. So that's my my plan now. I'm going to put a fly net over it because I keep getting flies landing on it. So once I get the fly net up, hopefully that'll take care of that problem. Okay, so here's what happened when I poured the river full of barbed wire. This is just me sanding it down. But the second that I poured this river in here, we had an emergency with some of the cattle, so I had to leave it for about 45 minutes. Right? You're not supposed to do that. And it overheated, cracked here, and had all these bubbles. These coffee beans we put in there floated loose, which would have been fine if it hadn't set in that 45 minutes I was gone. So when I got back, this was completely dried. Over here it was more shallow. It wasn't dried yet in a few places, but in other places it was. And so it just turned into a total mess with a bunch of trapped air bubbles and these fractures in here. This is my first pour, so I wasn't expecting that, because this here, when I put the first coating on, it took like 8 hours for it to dry. But since this was thicker, it dried a whole bunch faster. And I also forgot to leave the fan on, which would have kept it from cracking. So what I'm going to do is, I didn't fill it completely up. There's still like a 1/4 of an inch on these edges that needs epoxy. I'm going to turn this into a river table and put black epoxy in here. That's why I sanded this down, because this was a piece of wood that came up high. So I went ahead with the belt sander and just sanded that off here and here. That way I can just pour this full of a shallow mixture of black epoxy and turn it into a river table. Other than that, this thing is still gorgeous. And I think the river table will actually look better. Now that I look at this barbed wire in here, I don't really care for it that much. It's neat, but I think the black is simpler and more elegant. I filled this full. I didn't have any any airsoft BBs. That's what people put in here. So I just went ahead and took some rice and filled it full of rice. That way I get the exact amount I would need. So it's going to be about 30 ounces of epoxy to fill that up. So I'll fill that up, let it dry, and then pour my second coating over the whole thing and it. And we'll see how that looks. So stay tuned. Okay, so here's the finished product. I put the second overall pour on, which covered the Black River as well. So it's got a coating of clear epoxy. I just wiped it down with a wet rag, so that's why you see that glare there. I got some sawdust on it, so I wiped it down real quick. But it turned out really well. Almost all of my mistakes got taken care of. I've only got a couple that are lasting. I've got this spot right here that I should probably sand down, but I'm not going to. I've got another spot over there that I should probably sand down that had a bubble. So I could either sand those down, or I could just put another overall coat on here. So that's probably what I'll do. This is going in the barn, in our milk room. So it's not that big of a deal. And in a few years, when it gets scratched up a little bit, I'll just put a third coat on this and it will cover up those blemishes. But look how nice that looks, especially after the debacle of my deep pour with the barbed wire. I'm really happy with it. Anyhow, y'all have any questions, ask in the comments. I think I've showed you just about everything. I used plexiglass for the side here to keep the river from running out, and also on the very bottom there's a whole sheet of plexiglass going all the way through here. The plexiglass worked great. I put cooking oil on it, it was spray can olive oil, and it came right off. One thing I wish I had done was, this crack here had a hidden place where it was leaking. I tried to fill it up with black epoxy, because I thought it looked really nice going all the way through here. But when I did it, it just slowly ran out, and so I didn't get to fill it with black epoxy. I waited till it dried, the epoxy did, and then I found the leak and patched it with some caulk, and then I filled it with just clear epoxy. So just double check and make sure you get all the cracks plugged so you don't lose epoxy. But this was a total learning experience. I've learned a lot. I'm not sure if doing epoxy tables are worth it, because it's like an entire day of just babysitting this. And my mistakes came with me getting tired at the end of the day and then just not paying close enough attention. That's where all my mistakes happened. The barbed wire mess up where it cracked and got all the bubbles in it. That was because I was tired and ready to stop. Same thing with these bubbles here. The final coat was almost settled, almost completely cured, and I spent too much time away from it, like 20 minutes, and those bubbles emerged and I didn't catch them in time and they stuck. So if you're going to do this, make sure you block off enough time and get it situated so you can babysit it. All right, y'all, have a good day.